Here we are.
John Carter.
How are we doing?
Speaking for, but probably not only for myself, a bit shaken, frankly.
Oh, this is going to be a welcome relief, I think.
I would second that emotion.
Either that or no one's going to be paying attention to what each other says, and because we're all looking at the other browser.
Yeah. How you doing, Mark?
Well, thanks. How are you?
Good. It's not about this meeting, but Mark, I've got some numbers coming to you probably next week. The land use numbers. You should take a look at that for you.
In terms of what's been developed so far?
No, what does the comp plan? What's the maximum buildable in the comp plan? What's been built and approved so far, and then the difference.
Okay. Sounds good. Happy to look at it. You're the one person who's done it, probably, right?
Well, I've got some help from lead Larry, but the RA particularly.
Gotcha.
They're probably the ones that are most accurate as to what's out there.
Yeah, I've got a chart that we've developed as well, so we can compare numbers on it.
Compare notes.
So are we a small group tonight?
I think we got a good turnout. We got 20 participants total.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So we got some task force members also joining in.
Okay, here we are. I just didn't scroll enough.
I hope none of our number are downtown tonight.
Me too. Me too. So who's all here?
This is Tammy. I guess we're waiting for Jen.
Well, among others.
Thank you.
I see that Jennifer is here. And John. So Jose, David Gill is still not going to be here tonight, is that correct?
I haven't heard from David Gill, but I sent him a reminder.
I exchanged emails, but haven't, and we exchanged, but I haven't heard a final email back from him.
Okay.
John, for what it's worth, I got an email from him last night saying that he was kind of 50-50 as to whether he was going to be able to join. So
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. And I didn't see, is Jan here?
I don't see her on the
Okay.
panelist. I know that she had said that maybe Wednesdays weren't good last time, but
Yeah.
I can reach out and see if she's having issues.
Okay. So let me tell you whom I have seen. So let me tell you whom I've not seen. I've not seen Jan, not seen David Gill, and I've not seen David Vanel. Is David here? Sorry, I missed you, David.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. And then there you are. And so I've got Jose and Shamali and John King, Garcia, Mike Scott Leary, Nigel Aspel, and then Mike Jennings and Peter Chatterjee and Charles Cooper and Sean Murphy. Are you all Fairfax County folks?
No, well, this is Mike Jennings. I'm an alternate on the task force.
I'm very sorry. Pardon me, Mark, not recognizing that.
And Shane Murphy as well, also alternate on the task force.
Yeah, John, this is John. I'm sorry. This is Charles representing the Greater Reston Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, thank you, Charles.
Yeah, Charles is also on the task force, and Arpita is with county staff.
Okay,
Yes, I'm with GOT.
and I see Ann now. Okay,
Yes.
why don't we begin then? Good evening, everyone. It's been quite a day for all of us here in today. So we're going to perhaps as by way of attend to our comprehensive plan. I've established who's here, and thank you all for coming. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I so move.
Is that Lynn?
This is Burton.
That
I
is
second
correct.
that.
That is Lynn.
Was it you, Lynn, who moved? Okay, thank you. Any opposed? I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of
Did you have a second?
I got Burton as the second.
Got it. Good.
Okay. So a motion to approve the minutes of December 15th meeting as amended this morning. And the amendments were small things where I gave Bill Penniman a pseudonym of Pettigrew or something. What was it? Pennington. In one place. Hi, Bill. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes. This is Gary.
Gary, thank you. Is there a second?
Mark Malcolm, second.
I'm sorry, who was that? Mark?
Mark Malcolm,
Okay.
a second.
Thank you, Mark. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all. So what I'd like to do now is attempt to frame how I see our task tonight. So what we're trying to do is prepare for the full task force's January the 11th meeting, our work on transportation connectivity, and specifically two things. As close as we can come to a draft of the principles and our list of concerns that we've all been working on and which Jennifer has been scribing for us. So that's our task, and they told me that they've scheduled an hour and a quarter roughly for us to do that as the full task force's first crack at what we've been working on. Now, we had a very lively discussion last week on the principles, and there was no unanimity, and we had a string of wonderful comments, some very thoughtful. I mean, all of them were thoughtful, but some of them were also long, about transportation concerns generally, but the principles specifically. And the two main concerns that kept being raised last week under the principles were parking and private auto use. And what was the proper balance between trying to allow people to have the freedom to use their private autos, and also therefore a place to park in Reston on the one hand, with those concerned for congestion, how that would affect congestion, and those who wanted to promote preparing the way for better pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities, so that we did not need to rely on private autos so much. And there was a vigorous discussion, and I've continued discussing it with the framers of last week's draft, who initially were the three guys from MTAC, so Mike McDermott, Scott Leary, and Nigel Astill, but also initially John Keane and Mike Garcia. They weren't in the last round of discussions, so they worked on it. And then I had a good conversations with Gary Malkin, and tried to get his viewpoint and try to see whether we could find a common viewpoint. So what you have received, what I know you have received, is a draft this morning done by the MTAC team, and then a redraft of that later this evening, about 5 or 6 o'clock, I guess, which was the result of my conversations with Gary, trying to. I mean, we all realize that this is a tension between present and future. It's a tension between the modes that dominate now and those that might become more prevalent in the future. So it is not one or the other. It is somehow the two in tension, and I think trying to find the proper point of balance is the thing that is hard to find. So a big part of tonight, talking about the principles again, and Gary may want to, you did a chance, Gary, yours on. Gary? Gary wasn't sure he was going to be able to send his proposed revision in written to us all, but at least he can talk through it. So,
John, excuse me, did you say you sent something late this afternoon too? I don't know if I've seen that. Oh, I haven't seen that. Sorry. I mean,
I can verify I did not see anything this afternoon. I've just gone back through my emails. Mark Malcolm, thank you.
Okay.
This is Burton. I received it this afternoon. It was a bit of a challenge to catch up with the flurry of emails, but I got it through the listserv just fine.
Okay, and that was about 6, was it, or?
Yeah, you sent it at 6:13. I'm looking at the timestamp right now.
I received it as well, John.
Okay.
This is Lynn.
Okay. Okay. So
I think Jennifer has it up right now.
John, I haven't seen that myself. So I'm reading it as everybody else is.
Okay. Well, let me send it. Would you like me to send it to everybody now, or are we good just looking at
I think
Jennifer?
We're looking at what Jose or Jennifer has put up.
Exactly. And this is
a version that I assume is what you sent out, John. Is that correct?
Say that again, Gary.
Up on the screen right now is a revised version that I think Jennifer may have has put up from her computer. That is a revised version. Is that the same revised version that you put out? Can you see that on the screen that Jennifer has shown?
I see hers, and that's.
It looks like the same thing to me. I'm not sure if there's some other edits to it. This is
If it says evening version at the top, that's the version.
And that's a little different than what I had, but I'm reading it as we're going through this.
Yeah, Gary, I left it with you to send it. Okay, so this is what, after I talked with Scott about your concerns, this is Scott's attempt to address your concerns.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just seeing it now. Okay.
I'm sorry that it was so late, and that some of you did not get it apparently. So that is my framing of how I see our task tonight, to prepare something worth reviewing to the full task force on the 11th. Does that make sense?
It certainly does, John. This is Burton. I would like to comment on the principles, if I may.
Well, could we? We're about to jump into that. I just want to make sure everybody's okay with what we're proposing to do to them first. Is anybody against what I've proposed in number 4? Okay, well, I'll assume that it's okay. So now let's move to number 5, which is a review of the draft transportation connectivity principles. And again, there have been, you've had before you 2 versions, and I can send, Gary, is your version the same as we discussed?
No, I mean, I'm looking at the one. Why don't we just look at the one that Jennifer has up here that
okay,
I guess it's Scott sent out?
Yeah. So can
I guess, my point is continuing to be, I think, along the lines of what Lynn Molston sent out to everyone about, being what I would describe as balanced here and not favor one mode of transportation over the other. I think that's very, very important for Reston for the Future, if you all see my email. But restricting things like parking can, cause, very bad things in my mind, at least. If you want a walkability place, like I do, I want someplace to walk to. And if we discourage business, I think, or things like the library, we have a regional library here, speaking for Dennis Hayes, and we cannot have, restrictions to parking that violate even the law in Virginia in terms of what's required for a regional library. So we don't want to do Reston Inn. I mean, you've all heard me talk about this or seen the emails. I don't want to over the edge belabor it, but some cities in Germany, cities bigger than us, are able to balance that with support for roads, support for parking, support for walkability, support for pedestrian and bicycles. And I think, keeping Reston in a balanced mode that supports all of us keeps us to have a livable place here and support for everybody, regardless of, their income levels or their age or whatever. That's my point. So it's hard. I'm trying to read the changes and so forth here. But maybe I could open it up, or John, you could, for just comments by others on this point of, not appearing to be over the edge favoring certain modes and restricting private vehicles.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, is that Burton?
No, it's Scott.
Okay, Scott.
Just from a planning perspective and from an historical perspective, there's already been an unbalance, and Reston is not a balanced transportation area now. And I don't anticipate in the next 40 to 50 years it being fully balanced. However, if you're going to achieve, from a planning perspective, if you are going to achieve some measure of balance, now is the time to start writing 50 years of favoritism to the automobile. I'm just putting that out there.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
And I guess I want to have Reston be operating 50 years from today and not be, a ghost town 50 years from today, because the automobile, as you can see from the future perspectives of, big consultancy firms and the BBC and so forth and so on, it looks like it's going to expand. So we want to be able to have businesses be here and libraries be here and so forth and so on. So I'll just add that to what was just said.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Burton, you wanted to say something early on.
Yes, I had some questions and comments on the last version of the principles, and I didn't mean to be unappreciative of the work that the transportation planners put into the previous version, but I like this one. I can support this one. But something that is not captured here, and I don't know that it needs to be captured here, but I'd like it to be captured at some place in the minutes, because I don't think I've seen it yet, is this the principles are, they're talking about what's necessary to encourage a reduced reliance on private vehicles. So another way of phrasing that is to discourage reliance on private vehicles. I like the way that there's a positive spin on it there, but I think when at a policy level, I think that there's a push and a pull. So people are being influenced by disincentives and incentives at the same time. And it was several years ago that Fairfax County adopted goals to increase the share of bikes as a percentage of the mode share. And I don't know if county staff has an estimate now of how we're on the way to meeting that goal, but my guess is that we're nowhere near it, and that we're not going to get close to that by just improving bikeways, whether that's bike trails, bike paths, etc. I think in order to actually end up meeting those goals, there's gonna have to be some what would be perceived by people who prefer to drive as like a negative impact on them. Meaning, you know, people are not going to, in sufficient numbers, choose to bike just because there's a nice place to bike now. They're going to choose to bike because there are nicer places to bike and traffic has gotten worse for cars, or there's a charge for parking. So, and I'm not talking about forcing people not to drive. So all you out there, don't get too excited about that. What I'm talking about is just the marginal effect of a push and a pull, where there's incentives, but there's also disincentives, and they combine to have a bit more of an effect than just simply improving infrastructure for biking and walking. And I hope that makes sense. I think that level of service is a key term, and I don't know that level of service needs to be brought up in these principles, but maybe it would make sense to include something about level of service in the language that we end up in the plan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I may come back to reflections on level of service later, but is there anyone else who would like to talk about, and if people haven't had a chance to read this latest version of the MTAC attempt to draft the principles, has everyone had a chance, or should we pause and give people a chance?
It's hard to read on the screen.
Can you make it larger, Jennifer?
And John, to answer
Jose,
your question,
I think
it's
forwarded
Lynn.
the email to everyone.
Yeah, and I do have my hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Why don't you go ahead, Lynn?
Well, I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to see the email that I sent out yesterday. After having an opportunity to sit down and really review the principles that were put forth. And as a market researcher, I am agreeing very much so, I think, with Jan and Gary in seeing that there is a push to try and force one mode of transportation over another. And as a researcher, I think that it is incumbent upon transportation planners to not see what future they want, but to identify what the behavior of the community is and adapt planning to accommodate the needs and wants and desires of the community that they're serving. So I really do see that there's kind of and y'all know I'm from New Orleans. We have a saying, it's called, this looks like the tail wagging the dog. You know, but I really do think that this is bothersome to me, as it is. I've seen Jan and Gary as well, that, you know, there is a push by this group to try and move people towards less reliance on automobiles and greater planning for people who are going to adopt biking, walking, public transportation. You know, shoot, if we're looking 50 years out, why don't we start looking at transporter technology from Star Trek? But I think you see where I'm going here. And, you know, given the changes in consumer behavior that COVID has driven of late, and I identified 3 of those that I've seen in some of the research that I've been doing, where people are looking to live more in suburban versus urban environments, moving away from less dense dwelling configurations. So moving from high-rise multifamily to single-family homes and townhomes, and then people that are avoiding public transportation. And I do have to say that I did see the survey that Fairfax County is doing on public transportation, and I'm shocked that there is a push to increase service and increase frequency of buses running that are running empty. So from an environmental perspective, you know, putting diesel fumes into the environment, running empty buses through these routes is it's lunacy. So I'm done with my soapbox, but I do want to make sure that you all did see my 2 suggested edits to the principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Or pardon me. Thank you, Lynn. I did see that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker.
Hey, John, it's Mark Looney. Can I ask Lynn a question just so I'm clear? Where is it that you're concerned about that? Are you concerned that that's happening inside the TSA areas, or that folks outside the TSA areas are being discouraged from having parking and cars?
Well, if it goes into planning principles, then it's all. I mean, it's not being defined as TSA versus you know, PRC or any kind of a Reston zoned area. And the way that it's written in the principles is that it is, you know, all of Reston. So, you know, I think that there has to be a delineation. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd never thought about the fact that folks outside the TSA areas were being discouraged from owning vehicles. I thought the process was to enhance the choice of transportation to and from places of employment, places of shopping and retail, so that you weren't required to take a car every time you went. I didn't realize that the focus outside the TSA areas, or the suggestion was that outside the TSA areas, people should be discouraged from having cars.
That's the way the principles read.
Mr. Chair?
Scott, at this point, let's let members have a chance first, okay? Okay, but I recognize, Scott, we'll come back to you. Any other folks here?
John, this is Bill. I mean, I acted with a very different view than Lynn expressed, but I do want to be clear, you know, there's no suggestion that people should have their cars taken away or have reduced parking or anything else in the traditional PRC areas. The objective is, so to the extent there was any concern on that, we should be clear that the parking issues pertain to the TSA areas, not the rest of Reston. And it's not to prohibit parking, it's simply to permit reductions in parking, to recognize either the ability to do double duty to the parking that is built, or to recognize that you're trying to attract to the TS areas. You want the people who live in the TS areas to be people who came because they're prepared to walk and use the subway and do all the things that will keep them out of cars and keep them out of the roadways that will cause congestion for all the traditional PRC residents. So I do think it's important to draw the distinction, but in the TSA areas, I think we do want to permit or encourage even the developers to propose and receive reduced parking, which is a business decision. They won't make it if they think it's going to hurt, say, the commercial side. Now, there's another difference, residential versus commercial, inside the TSAs. The commercial people may think they need more, although if the local TSA residents are walking, they may not need more. They both, but in the residential, you really just don't want people to say, "Oh, I'll take all the advantage of all the cool things there, but I'm also going to drive and mess up traffic." So I think it's more than just saying we'll provide lots of options. We also want to attract people who are going to drive less. Those areas, not the rest of Reston.
Well, Bill, I'm one of those people, and I'm here because of walkability, but I don't have it anymore because there's nothing to walk to. Because the businesses won't be here if we restrict the parking. It's pretty simple in that regard. That's why we have, well, let me talk, Bill. That's why we have all the problem today in Reston Town Center with vacant restaurants and other businesses. People don't want to walk there anymore. They don't want to come from outside of Reston to the TSA because there's nothing to come to. They're restricted by the parking. They will not, it'll be hard to get them back. We might be able to get them back, but it will take years. And we're going to have a problem with the Reston Town Center metro because people in Reston Town Center will not even walk to the metro because it's so hard to walk to. I mean, those are reality facts. That's the way it is. So people will not come here to buy and live in Reston in the TSA if they can't park some. And people from outside won't come here. So that's my.
If I could just add one thing,
I guess, and I came here to live for that reason, and it's preventing. I'm just giving me, but lots of others have said the same thing. So,
I had two other points. I mean, and I've done reading into this beyond on the issues facing developers and the TSA type areas, TOD areas, and it does seem to be fairly broad agreement that at least permitting developers to choose to build less parking is desirable. Some would require it, but at least permit it. And to recognize that parking, Mark Looney pointed out before, adds a lot of cost, which will get built into rents. And to the extent you're trying to attract some lower income residents, a bigger mix, there's a problem created there if you require unnecessary levels of parking. It's an expenditure up front that you never get away from. And if you can avoid it, that would be better. As far as town center, I wasn't aware that there was a parking shortage in town center. I know a number of us, myself included, have reduced going there because we're annoyed that we have to get an app for convenient parking. But that's a personal that's a personal thing for some stubborn people like myself. But I think there's plenty of parking.
Yeah, and Bill, to that point, I mean, just for everybody's edification, the urban core of town center in 1989 got a parking reduction approved by the county that permitted then mobile land from developing roughly 30% of the parking that the county's ordinances otherwise would require because of the presence of the mix of uses. So the actual number of parking spaces in the urban core of town center is below what the ordinance otherwise would require if you were to stack the requirements one on top of the other. So to your point, it's not necessarily a numbers issue. It may be a reticence to pay for parking or to protest the way it was rolled out. But that's a different conversation than whether there's a sufficient number of spaces available, because that reduction's been there for over 30 years at this point.
So we already have a reduction. So why are we talking about reducing it further? And when you look at public transportation and the metro, so far the metro has let us down. Any people who are trying to use the metro, they don't have reliability in getting them to work. It breaks down, it stops or repairs. So far, until they get the kinks out in the future, it's just not very reliable. I know people use the bike paths and everything. They bike a lot and they ride the metro a lot, but they do that for fun, not work. They do it as a pastime, a hobby, as it will, bike clubs, all of that. You see it around Reston quite often, but you don't see it for people who are trying to get to work.
Dan, are you referring to some statistical studies that were done, or are these just your personal anecdotes?
Personal. But a study could be done.
John, if I could interject, this is David Vanell. I'd like to weigh in a little bit here. First of all, my experience on P&Z with developers coming to us to talk about development, residential development, retail development, commercial development in the TSA. These people are not stupid, and when they say they can accommodate with reduced number of parking spaces, they can accommodate the commercial needs, they can accommodate the retail needs, they can accommodate the personal needs, the private needs. They're the people who know what their clients require. I've never had any problem parking at the Wheeling Metro to get a train downtown. Not recently, of course, but and I've never had a difficulty finding a parking space in whatever parking garage in Reston Town Center I want to go to. I really think, and pardon me for being frank about this, but I think it's a fiction for us to believe that we can boost parking rates in the TSA and long-term goals. Nobody to keep people from having a car or using a car, but you have to have a blend of modes of transportation to go downtown, whether that's go down to downtown Reston or go to the metro station or whatever, go to a restaurant down there. We have to build in a variety of means from the non-TSA areas to downtown. We have to build in a variety of means for people and variety of paths for people to come from outside Reston to come either to the metro station or to the or to the town center or to the Wheelie area. If we don't continue to provide insist on a reduction in parking, the TSA won't work. And people are worried that people aren't going to come here. But if you can't get here because there's so damn many cars on the road trying to get to where everybody wants to go, and nobody has any other choices to get there, then this isn't going to work.
And if I could just interject, John, sorry, but to David's point, I think that if people are coming to Reston as a destination to eat and then get on the metro, where are they going to park? So I do think that as we look at and what I'm hearing, and I might just offer for the committee's or the task force's consideration, is that we add a delineation between the TSA and PRC and other zoning areas within Reston, so that there's no confusion.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Any other comments?
To echo what
Who's that?
Mark Malcolm. I want to echo Vanel's comments very directly. With this, I was one of the Metro riders, also 5A, also 599, and recognize a relatively large group that were consistent and changing. The issue that comes in, Reston is a unique location. Thing is for people who are outside of the area, there are three major, if you will, shopping areas: Dulles Town Center, Fair Oaks Mall, as it's before it gets completely redeveloped, even more so into mixed use, and Tyson's, which wants to become a city. Those three areas have huge amounts of free parking for the commercial retail shopping. And that was the difference with Reston Town Center making the change. Be aware of when you have options. You've got to have the mix. But the issue that comes between PRC and TSA is I have to look to the Atlanta model with MARTA in use of how you set buses to move through the residential areas to emphasize of getting to and from the different metro stations. They had an excellent arching system that's not quite yet into the way that Fairfax Connector is being designed. But right now, how to use the multimodal transportation other than pedestrian and bicycling is not quite as well designed as it should be. And that's one of the principles we need to focus to.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark.
This is Burton. I think we have some disagreement about some of these underlying issues, but looking at the text of the draft principles themselves, I think that they are balanced. I think that they're balanced and they're not biased towards one particular mode. I agree with Scott that if there's any bias right now in Reston, it has been and it is biased towards automobiles. So I move that we accept these principles as drafted by the planners and emailed out by John earlier today.
You mean this evening version?
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
So there's a motion.
Second.
Who seconded? Who was the second?
Vanel.
Okay, let's have a discussion. First of all, let me ask, has everyone had a chance to read this?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will say that I disagree. I think that we need to delineate the TSA and the PRC in this principle I think the way that it is written is too broad.
Okay, so.
I guess.
Go ahead.
John and others, I would just, I would make this obviously more balanced than I see it as written. But I think people are trying to, make it open and non-prejudicial in general, but I think it reads too much that way. But with that comment, I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So John Mooney?
Yes.
John Carter. There are other topics here. Maybe we're not going to come to a conclusion on this one, and maybe that's all right for now, because these might change as we move through the transportation section.
Right.
The proof, particularly on this number 3, is in the doing. And what is it that we're going to do in the plan, which may be more controversial. So maybe if we can't come to agreement, maybe that's okay, and we could just tell the full task force that. But I've got 2 other items. One is a minor wordsmithing, and the other one I just don't understand. In the first sentence, this is a minor thing. It's more of a wordsmithing thing, but there's one word that kind of grabs my attention because I just come from a different perspective. The Transportation and Connectivity Group recommends these principles as guidelines for transportation planning for staged growth. Well, Virginia doesn't allow staged growth to most people's dismay, but I don't know whether you want to use that staged growth term. We're probably not going to stage growth. We want the transportation planning to be staged with the growth, I guess. So I'll just offer that out there. And then my other item, it's the last sentence in the whole document. It's about the grid of streets. It's not in front of it. Yeah, there it is. Grids of streets are thoroughly addressed as a standalone concept. I don't know what that means, and do we really even need that sentence? I like the first sentence a lot. What does that mean?
I think the idea, John, was to acknowledge the document that you and Lynn worked together on, and that would be the fuller discussion of the grid of streets. Well, it's probably not a principle, is it? I would suggest deleting that, because we are going to get to the grid of streets. But I'll leave that for the task force, what you think about those 2 items. As I just comment, at this point, I'm going to let Scott speak. He had asked to speak earlier, but because he's not an actual appointed member to the committee, but an advisor to us, I wanted him to wait. But maybe he can say what that bullet means, especially the first sentence, and any other comment that he wants to make at this time. Scott?
Thank you. Commissioner, that was added specifically to address the fact that you folks were looking at the grid of streets in a separate document. The first sentence is the concept, and
yes,
the first sentence is intended to convey that your grid of streets is should be more than lines on a map. Yes. You need to be identifying which are going to be your back alleys, which are going to be your primary front streets, A's and B's in the planning terminology.
That's right.
So that you don't have a mix of, you don't have one building with a loading dock next to a building that has a storefront on the same street. You want all your loading docks one way and all that other fun stuff. I have no problem removing that. As far as the stage growth, I was unaware of the Virginia restriction. I have no problem rewording that or simply removing that. That sentence was modified just to clarify that, in my perspective, these principles are supposed to be a prism. They should be the lens through which you look at other things and stop and ask yourself. Nothing here is prescriptive. Nothing here is absolutely proscriptive. They are prismatic and form a lens. Are we doing the right thing? Are we balancing our transportation across the needs of all of the residents. And that means, and if Jennifer, if you don't mind scrolling down just a little bit. There we go. I think I have all the bullets in front of me now. The way these are written, nothing is specific to PRC zoned Reston or TSA zoned Reston. Everything is written to be such that it's appropriate. And particularly the parking, the sixth bullet, the parking provisions, they're appropriate to the scale and location. They're not proscribing any appropriate number. They are not in this, that bullet is not intended to say 0 parking, although that is my objective overall, but that's not what I've given to you folks. So something like the regional library, which I've heard brought up a couple of times, of course that's going to have a larger parking requirement. That's part of being appropriate to the scale and location. So for those who think that these principles are intended to outlaw automobiles, that's not the intent. However, we do have a history in the country of 100 years, in Reston of 50 years, of a bias that already exists. And to say that bringing some balance into play presents an excessive bias to non-vehicular modes is to say that you want to stay right here in 2021 at best, or move back to the 1980s. This is a planning document. You're looking forward. I will close with that.
I completely agree with looking forward. And we have to be careful in looking forward so we don't go back. And we have the risk of going backwards, as has been occurring recently. As far as these last changes are talked about, I would just follow John Carter and say, maybe we just, and you, Scott, maybe we just delete that last sentence and the three other words, and then you're okay. To me, anyway.
I also think that, sorry, but I do think that we need to delineate between the TSA and the PRC, because as these planning principles are written, it applies to all of Reston and is not appropriate.
But Lynn, they don't proscribe nor prescribe any specific solution. That's part of the larger document. These are the guidelines.
To encourage a reduced reliance on private vehicles is...
Okay, so Lynn, I live in Whisper Hill, which is just north of Stevenage Road, across from Trader Joe's. I do walk to Trader Joe's. You know what I don't have? I don't have a sidewalk to walk on.
Oh, neither do I.
So somebody less committed than I would get in their car and drive that 1/8 of a mile. These are the things that need to be addressed across the board. And that's where this principle comes in.
Right. So
I think the interpretation is going to be a bit different than what you've.
Again, these are intended to be principles. These are intended to be prismatic, the lens through which you view things. And that means you look at different pieces and you apply the appropriate response to each piece. That is the way I wrote them to be brought forward. And overall, moving forward.
Please, Scott. I don't want you to feel as though I am, in any way saying that the work that you've done is not excellent. I understand that. I just think that we need to be more cognizant of the differing principles that would apply. If we're
I want to intervene as chair here for a moment. So we have a motion and a second. Burton moved and Dave Vanel seconded. And I'm wondering whether the mover and the seconder would, I mean, we can do this various ways. We could vote on this as it is and see what happens and then vote on it in the way that I'm going to suggest, which is to add a sentence probably in the first, or whether in the first or second lead-in paragraph, that would say these principles will be applied somewhat differently in TSAs versus non-TSAs. That's the general idea. So rather than be real specific, simply acknowledge that these principles will apply in a different way in TSAs than in non-TSAs. So
this is Burton. I think I understood what you're asking for, John. I appreciated the points from John Carter. The last sentence in the document, I think, can be removed. The sentence where it talks about staged growth in Reston, I see that the draft on the screen now has the words for and staged stricken out, and I would suggest taking growth out too, so it just becomes for transportation planning in Reston. I disagree with Lynn's position that there be separate principles drafted for the TSA and non-TSA areas. I recall that we talked a fair amount about whether we should, in the plan, include the TSA and the PRC all in one section, because it was repetitive and I don't know. To me, it was unappealing. I don't know if it was unappealing, but it was definitely repetitive objectively. So I disagree with the idea of adding any mention of the TSA to these planning principles.
So, and Joe, this is David Vanel. I concur with Scott's comments, and I concur with Burton's comment. I think the differentiation in areas within Reston is adequately accommodated by the way that it was written in that last paragraph, and I see no reason to change it.
Well, so I am going to then, if Jennifer, if you could scroll down to bullet number 3 so I can see the full thing. So bullet number 3 currently, and this is the one that's giving me consternation, is that improvements to identify deficiencies in the pedestrian networks are necessary to encourage a reduced reliance on private vehicles. So we're saying that there should be no modal bias. That sentence, that statement, injects modal bias into these principles. That is where my consternation lays.
No, ma'am, I don't think it projects modal bias. I think it projects modal balance.
I respectfully disagree.
I agree with David on that. This is Burton.
This is Jennifer. I think that where we're seeing a difference of opinion here, and maybe you guys can just follow me on this sentence that says that the strategies incorporated this whole part. And it says, without the need to own and operate a private vehicle. If we add it to the end of that sentence, without the need to walk somewhere, without the need to bike somewhere, I think that the people who don't think that this is biased would then feel that it would be flipped around and it would be biased. So I think that is where the disagreement is among the group, is that when you specifically point out private vehicles. It's just like pointing out bicycles or pointing out walking or whatever mode of transportation you love or want to propagate in this task force. That is where this argument is hitting the rocks.
Just note, it doesn't say prohibit or take away, just to encourage reduced, give other options so we reduce traffic to the extent we can. And I don't think that should be threatening because it's only to encourage and it's only to reduce, not to eliminate, not to require. So, I mean, after listening to stuff,
David, are you done? Okay, then I'll.
As without the need to own or operate.
Yeah, I was puzzled on that too, Jennifer, and had a long talk with Scott, and that is really a corollary of the principle of mobility equity, and that basically says that even those who don't have a car should be able to get conveniently, obviously not as fast or sheltered from rain and snow as in a car, but they should be able also to have transportation modes available to them. So it gets down to the individual level that no one should have to have a private vehicle in order to have equitable mobility opportunities in Reston. That's the point. So that's what Scott helped me see, is how he helped me see his meaning. Does that make any sense?
This is David Bennell again. In addition, from Jennifer's comment, in addition, walking and biking are not problems, are not the kind of problems that a private vehicle downtown can become. So I'm not sure flipping it around is really the equivalent.
I agree with David's point, and I would also add that, you know, it's not an equivalent thing to talk about, you know, having a need to own and operate a vehicle, like meaning a car, versus a bike or versus walking shoes. These are dramatically different investment requirements in terms of, you know, hunks of metal and cash. And not to hammer on the pro car people, but you know, when you're driving a car, you're taking up a lot more space. You're imposing your physical presence out there on everybody else in a much bigger way than a bike and a pedestrian are.
Okay. So,
John, can I just add one more thing?
Please do.
Please. I just want folks on this call to understand that I grew up in New Orleans. I did not own a car until I was 26. I used public transportation to get from point A, from my home to point B, you know, multiple transfers to get to school, you know, but I am still saying that if we do not want to add modal bias to these principles, then we need to remove those delineations. And that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I still don't agree that the car should be the bad guy. I'm thinking of people who work. I'm thinking of people who need to get, I mean, there's so many people here who work down in DC. And so they can drive to Metro and park if there's room there. But there are other people who drive south. They drive at Fairfax City. They drive to the government center. And there's really no equivalent of transportation down that area. So I'm saying that, you know, we need to consider everyone's needs and just state that. that, you know, all methods of mobility should be considered, including driving automobiles, bikes, metro, all should be considered according to the needs of the people, and all should be considered. And also that I think we should concentrate more on the reality of what we have now, which is congestion. And this is something that we need to relieve fairly quickly. People are still going to drive cars. We can't wish them out of that, but we can make it easier for people coming in and people going out to do so without the congestion of the bridges, like underground, go under the toll road, which would be interesting. But there have to be other modes.
Let me give you a bit of background. So, if I may just make a comment, because I spent a good deal of time studying the Reston network analysis final report, and I don't know how many of you have studied it, but anyway, they focus. It's very focused. In fact, I'm convinced it's too narrowly focused on the TSAs. But so we're talking just about addressing the concerns about additional congestion in the TSAs. That's what the Reston network analysis is about. It ignores the rest of Reston. But here's what it says: that they for the TSAs, they accept LOS, level of service E, as the standard, the desired standard, which in the U.S. Transportation Research Council's Highway Capacity Manual, Section E, Level E, is described as a delay of 55 to 80 seconds getting through an intersection, which they then descriptively describe, quote, unstable flow, intolerable delay. But what they say will occur in the TSAs in Reston is well beyond level E, but levels F and a level beyond F, which they call a problem level. So level F is a delay of more than between 80 and 120 seconds, and problem is above 120 seconds. So they propose three levels, three tiers of improvements. Some are small, like different signage. Others are big, like the Soapstone Overpass or the Town Center Underpass, or major intersection changes. And even with those, and here's the point, even with those tiers 1, 2, and 3, which will cost, I have here, it's the total cost is I believe it's $2.5 billion. I have it here, but we needn't worry about it. But it's on that order. Even with those improvements, we will have 4 intersections just in the Wheelie TSA, 4 intersections that have a LOS of F or problem in the morning and 6 F or problem at night. So that's how bad the congestion is going to be, despite this great investment in new infrastructure. So we can't build ourselves out of congestion. We have to deal with it in a more integrated way.
Right. That's what I'm saying, is we need to plan for what we have.
Well, one could argue that we have. Go ahead.
Sorry, John and Jan. I think that Jan has some valid points that we could discuss later. But if you just look at the actual text of these principles, I would ask her to support them because I think the actual language is reasonably balanced. And to the extent that there is some language that people don't like about the, focusing on, without the need to own and operate a private vehicle, I think, I would argue that that is, just a slight attempt to address the imbalance that already exists, which is heavily biased towards privately owned vehicles. And, I kind of want to keep our working group moving also. So, if we could, for the maybe postpone discussions about individuals that who are driving to different parts of the county and just look at these principles at a high level.
Yeah, I understand your intent, Burton, but I do not think that we are going to achieve our desired consensus on this, I'm afraid.
Well,
The thing though, John, was that when you were talking about the intersections, that's where roundabouts would help so much.
You can't do roundabouts in the TSAs.
Actually,
John, I got
to speak a little bit. There's a lot of a difference between roundabouts and, if you will, circles. They're quite prevalent in the smaller circles that are basically not taking additional land area at intersections, both in Richmond and increasing in Arlington. Also, a minor suggestion, especially trying to build consensus. I would ask you to look at the second paragraph, the short sentence that leads into the bullets, where we've taken out the stage in transportation planning in Reston. I would suggest on the first line, there was a mention about we're looking at this as a prismatic look at. So it actually suggests putting a word before between these principles in the first line of the second paragraph. These prismatic principles as guidelines for transportation planning in Reston for both its residential and commercial areas. It gets away from identifying the PRC, the TSA, but recognizing that there are differences across different areas, but it also provides that overarching look to apply it uniquely to those different areas. A suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Burton, and I would support that suggestion from Mark Malcolm.
I would support that.
And this is David Vanel. If that was in the form of an amendment to the motion and Burton is fine with that, I would agree that I could still remain as the second on the motion. And
I think Jennifer had her hand up
and get the thing done.
Jennifer had her hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. It's hard for me to listen and watch hands. Pardon me here.
No worries. I have an additional word edit. But if you could give me the word edit one more time so I can put it on the screen and people can read it, that would be great.
Okay. With that second paragraph, the Transportation and Connectivity Working Group recommends these prismatic principles.
My concern, Mark, is does the ordinary reader understand what prismatic means?
No.
Most people do understand what a prism is. You look at it as a lens, you see it from different facets. It's something to look at a little bit later, but trying to at least address the second piece The reason for use of that word follows in the second part of it. Guidelines for transportation planning in Reston in its residential and commercial areas.
Right.
That's what gives the prismatic a reason to exist.
John,
I would rather say, Mark, leave the word prismatic out, and I like your addition at the end and say for transportation planning in Reston as adapted to both its residential and commercial areas, something like that. That gives you at least that variety of the prism.
but I think the prism is good, John. I mean, I understand it won't be totally understood, but it will be by people that are really in depth in looking at this.
Can I make a suggestion? My suggestion is that we vote on it as it's on the page now, or with or without the word prismatic, because I don't understand it. But all these are draft, proposed, possible, maybe someday principles. They're not. This is a stab, and so we shouldn't spend too much more time, struggling over them. They're very flexible. I think the people who drafted it and the people who moved and seconded it have made it clear these are very flexible, and we can refine them as we duke out the specifics in the later part, and then we can come back and make adjustments if we need it.
And we are the servants of the full task force. They will make the decision.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I was going to agree with a lot of people here that just spoke, including Jan and Mark and so forth. I just hope I think it might be good for us to come into this next week with saying there are disagreements on this, but I don't know what Lynn may think, but we ought to at least say we're, together and coming in and presenting something to them, even though we've had some disagreements. I don't know if Lynn wants to make a comment on that.
Okay. So thank you, Gary. With that, I'll
John.
vote. Yes.
I was waiting to do another change, and I think that the change might help get consensus.
Okay. What is it?
And it's something like this. It adds something about all modes of transportation, but also leaves in the not needing a car piece.
I'll leave it to the movers and shakers who moved it and seconded it, but I would object to that because I think we have to be trying to reduce vehicle travel. Otherwise, John Mooney's fears are going to be exacerbated. I mean, that's what we need to try to do, but not compel anybody, not take anybody's car away. So I think this modal legality thing is a mistake. It's confusing.
And I like it, of course.
And I don't, of course. This is Vanel.
This is Burton, and I don't like it, but I partly don't like it because I think it gives ammunition to those who are opposed to Lynn and Jan. If we're saying that we want to give equal parity between all modes of transportation, then we're going to be having to shut down a lot of automobile lanes and convert them into parks and sidewalks and bike lanes immediately. I don't think this committee wants equal parity. I think we still collectively want the automobile to be dominant, just not as dominant as it is right now. In the second paragraph where right now, I'm flexible about prismatic. I can take or leave prismatic, but where there's the parentheses around as adapting, I think it should be adaptive to, like comma after Reston, adaptive to, and then delete in. Just trying to be grammatically correct and understandable there.
At the risk of accepting slings and arrows, I'll just point out for the sake of discussion that one way to solve all of this is to have one set of transportation recommendations for the areas outside the TSA and a second set of recommendations for the areas inside the TSA, which is where we started.
That's an idea.
I would agree with that.
But are you saying that?
I would not, because the whole purpose is to have the thing integrated.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Is like
we need some flexibility.
It's like planning Nevada and Chicago all in the same document. But I get your point, David. I get the objective. I'm just saying that this is what makes it difficult. Is that you really have two competing visions of the world that you're trying to meld together into one document.
And we have to keep in mind who's going to be reading and interpreting these documents, because it's not going to be us when they're done. It's going to be people like Mark representing his clients. It's going to be Fairfax County staff. It's going to be people, commissioners like John Carter. So we need to make it clear what we're trying to say without needing to interpret it.
Well, some of that happens,
and I think
in the specific provisions in the various sections of the document itself. So the principles are meant to be broad, applying to everything, and then specific provisions will particularize it to TSAs and to residential areas and so forth. Which is
and John, if I can add to that, I think the problem, we exacerbate the problem if we try to separate out the two parts of Reston. The only way this is going to work is if the two parts of Reston understand how the linkages are made. And to have, to do Nevada and then Chicago, I think is a mistake. I think it needs to be one document, understanding that both areas are connected and both areas need to understand how the connections work.
Yeah. Well,
John, I've got one suggestion. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I'm hoping for a good suggestion, John.
Yes. Well, if it's not, it's okay. Just tell me no. But I'm trying to be helpful. I don't know that there's controversy in the first paragraph, so I would leave it the way it was. Mm-hmm. And I think Jennifer is onto something, but I would take those notions and put them into, if you could scroll up, bullet 3. And, we're improving the pedestrian and bicycle networks, not just to reduce reliance on private vehicles. We have other reasons. Wellness was something that Jennifer and Michelle have brought up. I wonder if we could take some of the controversy out of it. And I realize, and if you don't like it's fine, but I'm going to make the suggestion to improvements to identified efficiencies in the transportation bicycle networks. Notice we're not saying roads. We're just saying in the pedestrian and bicycle networks are necessary to establish an equitable and balanced mode between the transportation modes and land use. Is that too many words? I'm eliminating the fire into this. I recognize the private vehicles part of it, and
that would get me to yes.
I'm just not sure that it gets the other side. I've been in many of these arguments before, and I'm trying to be helpful. I'm not trying to upset the apple cart here, but
I actually like it, John. Would you help?
Can you do it one more time?
okay. Improvements to the deficiency in the pedestrian and bicycle networks. I would take the transportation out. So we can do
I
this.
thought that's what you were adding. Okay.
Take that out. So improvements to identified deficiencies in the pedestrian and bicycle networks to establish an equitable and balance between transportation modes and the land uses.
Balanced. You went too fast. Establish an equitable and balanced.
Balance between transportation modes.
An equitable balance between.
Yes, that's better. Thank you. And land use. Or land uses. So what does reduce this issue? It broadens this, so it's not just reduce the reliance on private vehicles, although it could do that. Now, let's be honest.
That's brilliant, John. Great edit.
So what does the group think? Would you accept that as an amendment to the motion?
This is Burton, and I would accept that. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Burton.
I would reluctantly accept that as my second.
Basically puts off this issue of reliance on private vehicles to a later point. Remember that a lot of this would be in the zoning ordinance and not in the comp plan. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
It's good.
Vanel?
What I
try that again, John?
First paragraph.
Let me just get David's reaction here. David?
I would reluctantly accept that change. I still think there needs to be, well, we have the private vehicle stuff in the first paragraph, so that's okay.
Yeah, that's
I'd still second it.
Okay.
That's what I'm objecting to, is the private vehicle in the first paragraph, where you talk about strategies, attractive alternatives to access without requiring the use of private vehicle. I would like it to say strategies in you options to access those things. Period.
I would have a lot of trouble with that, John. I think we need to vote on this thing.
Yeah, we do. That's the private vehicle part of it. I mean, you're picking on the private vehicle.
Well,
You're really not. You're picking on the need to own and operate a private vehicle in order to function in society. So it's not taking away anyone's car. It's not sending anyone to prison or making them wear a sign of some sort of shame, like they're a car driver. It's just trying to get towards more balance.
Well, then say that. We're trying to get to more balance.
well, actually, Jan, here's how I read it. Let me be concrete. To me, that sentence says, if John Mooney goes blind tomorrow and can't drive, he should, that the Reston community should help John Mooney and those like him to have attractive alternatives for mobility to get to the services and social engagements they want, even though they can't operate a car. So that's what it's saying. It's not saying anything against those who do. It's trying to talk about the equitable right to mobility that those without a car should have. Does that make any sense?
But yeah, but we should say that equitable right to have attractive presentations without the need of card.
I think that's what it's trying to say. Well, let's do this. Let's. I'm going to call the vote, and we will note those who dissent, and I will invite those people to send me a sentence or two on why they dissent. Okay. So those in favor of the motion to approve this draft, again, it's only of our working group, and send it for consideration to the task force. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This is Burton.
Just for clarification, this is as amended?
As amended. As amended.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Is anybody against the motion? Okay. Am I correct that we have the unanimous consent?
This is Jennifer. Sorry, John, I'm raising my hand.
Okay. So yes, Jennifer.
I'm voting no.
Voting no. Okay. All right. Will you will note that? So Jennifer is the sole dissenting vote. And Jennifer, if you would send me something that I can put into the minutes why you voted against it, since that's our approximation of consensus. Okay?
Sure, will do.
Well,
okay.
I'll just say, John, that I think you can see Jan and Lynn and Jennifer and I have concern, and others maybe concerns. I'm voting yes because I think people have worked together really well and just trying to keep us together here. And I would just suggest that you say there's been a lot of disagreement relating to this and take Jennifer's specific comments and whoever else, I don't know what Jane voted here, and point out there's been a lot of disagreement. That's my 2 cents on it.
That's
a great conversation, by the way.
That's a good point. And as you know, Gary, I try to do minutes in that way to show differing views. So I'll do that in a more general way, but Jennifer will give us her specific reason for voting against it. Okay?
Just thinking about how it's presented by you. I assume you're the presenter next Monday.
Okay.
And that's why I'm voting no, is because I want to make sure that the altering views that we have had during this discussion are represented. So I will send you something, John, but that's the reason why.
Okay. Okay. Well, that was easy. Now let's do something hard. Okay.
John, I will save this and send it to you.
Thank you very much, dear secretary, dear scribe. So let us not even try right now to work anymore on the concerns, the list of concerns. Let's go down to well, let me ask this. Let's do talk about number 6 for a brief moment. Does anyone have any more concerns that they want to add at this point? All right. Has everyone submitted to Jennifer what they want to identify as a transportation? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So perhaps
I submitted the outline to the outline additions to the outline tonight at 6.
I'm sorry, Jan, would you read?
I got those, Jan, and I'm about to share that document. Just give me 1 second.
Thank you.
So I had a wonderful chat with Jennifer about this a couple days ago about how we're going to do this, because our outline is only the most telegraphic of documents. It doesn't have a lot of words. It doesn't explain itself. And so I asked Jennifer for how we can help the task force understand some of the discussion that stands behind those telegraphic annotations in the outline. And she said wisely, they can always read our minutes, and they can always read the string of comments in our listserv. And that's what I propose to do. Otherwise, we would have to have a talkathon with the task force. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, John. This is Burton. I think we should try our best to take this transportation topic as our responsibility to hash out and not rehash it out once we're before the full task force.
That ultimately it will be their list. You know, they have to approve the list. They have to own what we've produced. And to do that, they have to understand it to a certain extent. But I think they can do that, A, by reading, as Jennifer said, our minutes and our listserv emails, which they all get. And secondly, if they have a particular question, they can ask us when we're before them. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So again, Jose, we do have about an hour and a quarter. Is that correct on the 11th?
Yeah, if that's what the subgroup I think needs to present information on what they've been working on. I think that's fine.
Okay. So, I mean, you want us to this is, I'm not sure whether the task force will be able to conclude their evaluation of what we're presenting. So there could be another meeting yet with the full task force.
Was the intent to send this outline as is right now to the task force by today or tomorrow or Friday? Because the weekend I know it becomes more of a chore to read some documents. So it's really up to the subgroup if this is where they kind of want to leave this outline to share with the task force.
I will send it out with Jennifer's help. We'll finalize it and I'll send it out no later than Friday.
Okay.
With the comments I just made, that if they want to understand the rather telegraphic entries on it, they can read our minutes, they can read our listserv chains of emails, or they can ask us questions at their.
Understood.
All right.
The other suggestions I had to John is I might take one last look at it and keep all of the data here, but organize it in something that's more logical order. I didn't want to mess with the document too much so you could see the changes. And then also reread the document to make sure there is an opinion in the document, that it really is a list of topics. We've had a lot of discussion on opinions, which I think is good and will get us farther along after the full task force meeting, but taking opinion out of the list of topics for the full task force at this point.
Now, we had talked earlier, though, Jennifer, of adopting John's, I think, John, you had a 4-point outline for transportation issues. I forget what they all were, but one was facilities, one was, I know one was management and so forth. So we'll still use those general categories, correct, Jennifer?
Yes, these numbers that are here are John's originals.
Okay. Good.
But for instance, in this grid of streets section, there's very specific, like, look at this road, look at that road. And I'd like to clump all of that type of stuff together and make it separate from something like consider writing in some flexibility into the grid of streets.
Right. And
does that make sense?
Pardon me.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yep. I trust your ability to organize this, Jennifer. Thank you. So moving down to number 8, our next meeting is January 19th. Does that still work for everyone?
I just want to make sure people are okay with Jan's changes because they came in fairly close to the meeting, and they're in yellow in the document here. So I just wanted to go over those really quickly.
Okay, let's do that.
So the first one is here, needs of residents who need auto transportation and parking places under the balancing section. Under roads, she's adding a bullet point about tunnels. Under bus and van systems, she added the word reliability. Under the road to nowhere, which I might just take out the road to nowhere because I added in exactly what road we're speaking of. It's going to be put to use. That, Jan, I might delete because it's more of a opinion. It slants it a little bit, but I think it should be addressed by this group.
Thank you.
I think that was it, right? Yeah, that was all of them that Jan had sent today.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, so if everyone is still good for January 19th, it'll be, we'll try to prepare a response to whatever the task force directs us to do at the meeting on the 11th. And if their directions are basically positive, then we'll begin drafting deliverable 3, which is a polished concern. So the action items, number 9, the action assignments before the next meeting. Again, if there are any individual concerns that you want to submit, do it very quickly, or perhaps we have no, let's just say we have no room for it at this point. We need to finish this to get it to the full task force. And then in preparing for our next meeting, which is after the 11th, so our meeting, we have the task force meeting on the 11th, our next meeting on the 19th. Between the 11th and the 19th, I would like to have some volunteers to work to begin preparing a more polished version of the concerns, the issues. And Jennifer, I'd like you to be there. I'll be on it. Would maybe at least for the principals, maybe some of the MTAC team. Anyone else interested in helping prepare the polished version that we'll take up on the 19th? Okay. Okay. We'll do it. Okay. Number 10, any additional business?
Hey, John, I think Lynn had a question.
Oh, sorry, Lynn. Thanks for monitoring that.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. Yeah, I was just saying that I'll be happy to help if you need some extra eyes.
Wonderful. I'll put you down.
This is Burton. I have a conflict on the 19th, and I was wondering if it'd be possible to have it any other night that week.
Let's see. Do folks want to let me get my calendar?
I would like to say, please don't keep changing the meetings, because I can make the Tuesdays all right. I can make Mondays, but I can't make the others unless they're Thursdays. It really presents a hardship.
Okay.
Other people who can't make it just say they can't make it, and they'll catch up with you later.
Okay. So the 19th is a Tuesday.
Right.
This is Mike from Fairfax DOT. So Monday is MLK holiday and Wednesday is Inauguration Day. So that only leaves you Thursday, just for what it's worth.
I would suggest keeping the day just because that week is kind of tough, but whatever the subgroup wants to decide. Thank you, Mike.
I mean, that's the way you originally set it up. I think we need to go from there.
And Bert, you're the one who can't be there. Is that correct?
Well, it's that I have a conflict. So, you know, I have another meeting and I'd like to go to it, and I can't be in both meetings at the same time. So I'll have to just decide which one to do.
Okay.
Well, I'm disappointed that you can't bilocate. I had a higher opinion of you. That's a silly joke.
Maybe the technology will get there someday.
Okay. Okay. Any additional business? Okay, a motion for adjournment, please.
So move.
I second.
Thank you, guys. Anybody opposed? Let them be shot.
Thanks for a great conversation.
Okay, thank you, guys. This was hard work, not easy, and especially with the background of today, I found it hard. So, see you on the 11th and then on the 19th. Take care.
Thank you for your leadership, John.
Thank you for doing this, John. It's wonderful.
Okay. Bye now.
Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks